We saw in the last video that when we make decisions in hypothesis testing, which will be step 5 of our hypothesis test method, there are only two possibilities. You're going to either reject the null hypothesis or not reject the null hypothesis. That's it. Those are the only options. But the thing is, when you make a decision to reject or not reject the null hypothesis, there are a couple possible outcomes from that decision. Because whenever you make a choice, it could be that you're making the correct decision, or it could be that you're making a decision that's an error. Okay, so if we reject the null hypothesis and the null hypothesis was truly false and the alternative was true, then when we rejected that null hypothesis, that's a correct decision. And then if we didn't, we reject the null hypothesis, but the null hypothesis was true and the alternative was false, that would be a type 1 error. And I have all of the correct decisions and errors typed up here, but I think it's a little bit easier to see in this little diagram down here. So here's reality up here. So working down the columns. So down the columns, there's truth, right? Real truth. Of course, in real life, we don't actually know what reality is most of the time, believe it or not. We know what we think reality is, but that's not the same thing. And over here in the rows, we're making our conclusions to either reject or not reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so if H naught was true, right, and I did not reject it, that would be a correct decision, right? If H naught was false, but H1 was true, the alternative is true. If I did not reject the null hypothesis, that would be a type 2 error. And then if I did reject the null hypothesis, that would be correct. These are called false positives in medicine, I should say. They're not false positives, false negatives all the time. It sort of depends on your hypotheses, what you've set up to be your null and alternative hypotheses. But in medicine, we call these often, not always, but often call them false positives and false negatives. Okay, so let's consider another example besides the medical system. Let's consider the legal system. So in the US legal system, according to the Constitution, you are supposed to be innocent unless we can prove you're guilty, which means that the null hypothesis is innocence and the alternative is guilt. Okay, so if that's the case, then what are the possible outcomes that we could have for our conclusions on our reality? All right, let's first deal with reality. So let's suppose in reality, the person accused truly did not commit the crime. So that means the null hypothesis, the innocence hypothesis, is actually true. Okay, so if that's the actual case, that's reality, then I could have it so that the alternative is actually true. So the person accused actually did commit the crime. So those are the two possible realities. And we're, of course, assuming a binomial thing here. Either you did it or you did not do it. Right? There's no in between. Now, what are the possible verdicts? If I do not reject the null hypothesis, that means I'm letting the null hypothesis stand. And the null hypothesis is that the person is innocent. Okay, so I'm letting that go, and I would cast a verdict of not guilty, not innocence. We do not guilty, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And if I reject that null hypothesis, if I reject their innocence, then I'm going to state that the verdict is guilty. That will be my verdict. Now, it's a verdict. I don't know the person is guilty. I think they're guilty within a reasonable doubt, or whatever the legal threshold is for this particular case. Okay, so let's look here. What are the four possibilities? So in the top left corner, the person truly did not commit the crime. They are actually innocent. And the verdict was not guilty. And that'd be this corner right here. And that'd be a great corner to have, because that's a correct decision. It's making an innocent person is going free. Yay, team. All right, now the other correct decision's in the bottom right corner. That's a person that really did the crime and their verdict is guilty. Well, I don't know if it makes us happy, but at least we would know that we put away somebody that actually did the crime, so they should do the time. So the guilty person is sent to prison. Okay, so those are correct decisions. Great. And they happen a lot of the time, hopefully most of the time, right? And same thing would be the case for, I don't know, medical decisions. You know, you don't have the disease and you walk free. You know, no disease, no treatment. Yay. You do have the disease and you get treatment. Great, right? Those are good things. But that doesn't mean that the other two are not possible, and they are. All right, so let's look at the bottom left corner first. So the person did not commit the crime. They're innocent, truly innocent, but they were convicted. Okay. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, that happens a lot. It happens more than we would all like. Now, they make great movies about things like this. For example, Shawshank Redemption is a very, very good movie. Should have won Best Picture in that year, in my personal opinion. Um, and it's about a man who was wrongly convicted of a crime that he did not commit. Unfortunately, there are actually far too many real life examples of this. And if ever you're interested, um, pay attention to the news for a few months, and somebody will be let go from death row or from life imprisonment who did not do the crime. And if you're interested in more on that, there is the Innocence Project, which is a nonprofit project that works to exonerate wrongfully convicted prisoners. And unfortunately, they've had a lot of success. I mean, not thousands and thousands, but hundreds and hundreds of people have been let go because of their work, which means that there were people that were wrongfully convicted in every single state, because it's going to happen, right? You can never be 100% sure that it's not going to happen. In other words, type 1 errors are going to happen in any system, including the legal system, including the medical system, including all sorts of things. All right, now type 2 error is a person truly did the crime, but they were let go. Upon this, many, many soap operas are built, right? Now, of course, there are bad examples of this too. Somebody really did the murder and then they went on to commit more murders or things like that. But it's a guilty person set free, right? A guilty person gets to walk. And literally, General Hospital and One Life to Live and all of the others would not survive if they didn't have things like this going on, because this is what creates the drama in soap operas. But the Joker as well. I mean, obviously guilty, but walking around and still able to get at Batman on occasion. So that would be a type 2 error. And of course, both of these are very bad errors. I mean, you don't want guilty people walking around free as a general rule, and you definitely don't want innocent people being put away for things they didn't do. Both of them are bad, and they both will for sure happen, because you can't set up a system that is 100% accurate all the time. We can't even have pregnancy tests that are 100% accurate all the time. It just doesn't work like that, right? So medical testing, legal system, all these kinds of things, anything where you're making a decision, it is possible to be making the wrong decision, and you cannot lower that possibility to zero. We'll talk more about that in a later video.